Hello, everyone. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to our YouTube channel. Welcome to Carbonethic. Always a pleasure to meet with all the viewers. Thanks very much again for sharing and liking if you appreciate these videos. Joining me, as usual, our CEO, Mr. Brent Tolme. How are you, Brent?
Doing well, Martin.
So this week we're gonna talk about something that the people don't know yet publicly. We're working in a new project located to Dease Lake, according to our partners, which is Dease River First Nation, if I'm not mistaken. Right, I say it well. And for the people who wants to know a little bit more about the new project, adding into our family of different products and projects, Brent. What's going on with Dease Lake project? We're going to look as well as what's the size, who's the partners, and such kind of questions that I know that you can answer for sure. So let's start. What type of project Dease River is?
Well, yeah, exciting times, and it's exciting to be rolling this out publicly. So can't wait until this is news that we can share, and we're at that point. So we have just signed an agreement with Dease River First Nation, which is one of the members, of the five Casca Nations, and they're located in around Dease Lake as a landmark, and it is in west/north central British Columbia. And this will be an improved forest management project as well. And it's an interesting project because it's in the northwestern corner of BC, and it's in the Cassiar Forest District, which happens to be the largest forest district in the province, comprising of over 13 million hectares. This project in and of itself focuses on the traditional and unceded territory of the Dease River First Nation. And at first, we're going to examine a really productive area of about 300,000 hectares to see what we can generate from credits in that area by improved forest management. And so when you do zoom in on Dease Lake, what you see, of course, are a lot of mountains, a lot of mountain ranges, obviously to the east, to the north, to the south, pretty much in every direction. But what that means in the valley bottoms are very productive forests that are biologically diverse, that are rich, that have an abundance of wildlife species, from thin-horned sheep, caribou, mountain goats, right through to grizzly bears, black bears, wolverines, lynx, and other types of wolves, everything in there, as well as bird species, a pile of different species of fish, because most of the TSAs drain into the Pacific Ocean. So you're going to see the five varietals of salmon being Chinook, pink, chum, sockeye, etc., as well as being fairly productive forests with lodgepole pine, white and black spruce, western hemlock, subalpine fir, as well as deciduous species. And so it's a really interesting place. About 80% of it can be tundra, it can be rock, provincial parks, ecological reserves, which is why we're focusing on an area where we can improve the forest. So it's a really exciting time for us to sort of get our hands in the dirt, as it were, to talk about this new project and just see what we can do with a template where forestry is an allowable activity, where it hasn't been practiced because of the remoteness and the lack of opportunities for the community members. So we're just really proud to be partnering with Dease River First Nation, Chief Miles, and everybody there on council, as well as the community.
That's awesome. Knowing that there's multiple different kinds of offsets, what type of offsets can it generate?
That's a great question. Traditionally, in improved forest management projects, we see mostly avoidance credits, which means that we're avoiding cutting the forest down, and so therefore we can take a part of a credit for what is not cut down versus what would have occurred naturally. So we're really doing two sets of math. We're doing a baseline, we're modeling a scenario out 100 years, and then we're comparing the difference between the two, and that small amount is what we can credit for. In this case, we're talking about things like extended rotation. So if we had the ability to leave these trees, if we had the ability to improve this forest, either through manipulation, through commercial pruning, thinning, if we were to add different types of fertilizer, that were ecologically sound and made sense for the project, can we increase the sort of efficacy of that carbon sequestration? And so all that to say, we typically generate avoidance credits. In this case, we can generate actual removal credits too, which is to say that instead of cutting down that forest and not doing that, we've now avoided that scenario. And so we can have what's called an avoidance credit, which means that didn't get converted to something else. Removals are, well, if this forest wasn't here, and we planted it, well, that's pure removal, right? Or if a forest burned down and for whatever reason it didn't reseed and we planted it, that's pure removal, because those trees, if we didn't do anything in the baseline scenario, those removals would not occur. So anything we do proactively, we can change into a removal credit. And so that's helpful because there's a lot of companies that don't understand additionality, or they're afraid of it because of all the bad acting in the voluntary system. This is an instance where we can really do that. We can lean into that and show people a different type of credit, and what it means to take a large forested area in context and think about how we can generate the best productivity for the forest, for the community, and obviously for the biodiversity and the wildlife.
So, knowing now that we just signed the agreement with the Dease River First Nation, what needs to be done from now? What's going to happen in the next few weeks, the few months, till we can process and get the certification from FCOP, so from the British Columbia Registry, and deliver actually to market these offsets that we're going to work on?
Yeah, it's a great question, because and one of the challenges when we work in these remote areas where not enough analytical work has been provided, which is typically a role of the government, is that we really do need to establish some permanent sample plots by forest type. And we can use that information to say, okay, well, how is this forest actually performing today? And that creates our baseline scenario. So we need to do some forest inventory, such as what we did in the SIA area of the Dene-Kekusan project. So boots on the ground, measuring trees, height, species, grades, wrapping a tape measure around the trunk, all those different things to establish that information. Then we need to take that and we start to map out all the areas, find the areas of overlap with other projects or other reserves set aside, make sure that our mapping is very accurate. And then we start to generate what a carbon offset model could look like. And then we have to decide, based on all those areas of opportunity, what type of activity we would do to improve the forest and model that out. So it gets down to, we need some better information. We need to run a bunch of different scenarios to see what actually can generate the best result for our project partners and Carbonethic as well.
So if you measure, let's say, a specific territory, a piece of land, of course, there's some mountains which are pure rocks. There's lakes. There's other areas which has been burned by a forest fire, I imagine,
Yep.
so you have to extract actually these kind of information out of the model, because there is no carbon sequestration happening where there's a lake in such ways, right? So this is what you have to remove as well. So to help out the mapping process, do we use also some different technologies to help us out, easing and bringing more granularity into the analysis?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've done a lot of modeling, obviously, in forests like this with the Dene-Kekusan project and the SIA project. So we use a fair amount of GIS technology, which is the ability to map at a granular level. And then we supplement that with whatever sources of LiDAR that we can get, as well as Government Vegetation Resource Index. So we're pulling from all the different sources we can get our hands on to start to influence what that sort of process, planning process looks like. But then there's no substitute for technology. And if we can get out there and start to fly our own LiDAR, start to fly our own mapping with our big commercial drones, well, then we start to get really granular information versus generic sort of lacking granular information. We get more precision when we fly our own information. And so that's what we want to pull into to be able to track our projects. And I'll tell you why technology is important too, is if we're going to measure if we improved a forest, well, how do we do that if we're only seeing it every 5 years, every 10 years? How do we see it if we're only sampling 20 sample plots over 100,000 hectares, like some of these projects do, or less even in some cases? We need to be able to prove that the change that we made and that people are paying for in the form of credits actually are meaningful. And so we do that through remote sensing technology. So we need to find a method that's capital efficient. So that's why we're a big believer in drones and writing our own proprietary code to extract what a tree looks like based on LiDAR, based on ortho, even based on satellite imagery, like from free sources like Sentinel-2, and pulling that all together to say, okay, we planted some trees. Aside from sending a body out there to actually measure the trees, can we remeasure that and capture 1,000 hectares of data on a daily basis to actually show the customer and the client for the credit that, yeah, your tree planting went well. These trees, here's the mortality rate. Here's how many trees survived. Here's how many trees died. Here's where we expect those trees to be. This is where they actually were. This is how much they grew. This is how much their canopy spread out. All those things in commercial thinning, where we're cutting down trees to improve the amount of sunlight that each tree gets, and so it doesn't have to compete against scarce nutrients. We want to be able to measure that remotely. Because then sending a remote sensing crew out, 2 people in a vehicle, they can capture 1,000 hectares of data, whereas we're hard pressed to do, more than 10 quality samples in a day. And if they're a permanent sample plot, probably less than 1 a day. So it's just cost, and we're finding new and innovative ways to lower the cost and increase confidence in the credits that we're selling.
Yeah. So I guess my next question is that the technology that we are using helps as well, regarding extended rotation processes and such.
Yeah, and so extended rotation, I'm glad you asked that, is an interesting concept where we start thinking about, all right, we can cut these trees down now and create wood products that benefit people, that make a profit. But what happens if we were to leave this productive growing forest and instead defer the cutting down of it for another 10 years? How much extra carbon would that pack on if we deferred that activity? Or even further, if we got into that forest and we recognized that there was maybe some challenges in understory growth or over densification, like there is in a lot of these naturally regenerating pine stands, if we were to actually remove some trees, and we have to actually carbon account for those removals, but will we get a much bigger, more robust, and more fire resilient forest in the future? And so that's really what extended rotation, pre-commercial thinning, spacing, pruning, site prep, as well as replanting burn stands really looks like, which is we get good information. We make a choice to employ tried and true systems of increasing the production of forests while weighing out the need to have good ecologically sound silviculture practices. And we look at increasing basically the productivity of that forest, rather than just saying we're going to not chop it down, and create all this carbon through the chopping down activity, as well as the 30 plus years it takes to get that forest back into really productive stand, or perhaps as short as 24 and perhaps as long as 32. It's a window of time. So we do all those things, and we're able to generate a different style of credit because we're actually doing active forest management. And that's one of the elements that all of our projects have, which is this notion of, if we have the capital from the offset sales, and let's remember our business model, which is 20% back into the forest, well, that really means doing these types of projects so that we can not only increase more credits, but just do the right thing, frankly.
Yeah. And so what can we expect regarding delivery? Because okay, now we have the agreement with our partners. The mapping actually and the initial phase of the analysis, if I may say, is in progress. So our forest team is already working on it. What's the timeline regarding delivering the initial phase to proof of the documentation that we can send the team out and such till we get to certification and delivery? What do you expect? What is your forecast, Brent?
Yeah, great question. We think so. It's early June now, and we have our agreement. So we expect to be submitting what's called the project delivery document, which essentially just documents how we expect to generate credits, all the mapping components, all the consulting components. So we think we can have that ready right into early July to submit to the government. And then the next step is that we will need the Indigenous Atmospheric Benefits Agreement signed. And we'll rely heavily on our relationship with the BC government, including the carbon offset team, as well as the forestry team, who've been great to work with, as well as chief and council from Dease River, to really push that through. And we can expect that to take a few months with government, and summer tends to be a dead zone with vacation and whatnot. So we really want to come out of September to be able to go do some core sampling, and hopefully even summer if we can find a project sponsor that's interested in working with us, and that goes on to us being able to continue to raise capital to get these projects underway. So if all things go according to plan, we would expect a 2024 issuance, probably right towards the end of the year. So
that's great.
We know this forest, we know this timber type, we know the nation, we know what the challenges are in terms of access. We've done it before, pulling out all the stops to get our information from the SIA at the last minute, late October into November. So we're prepared for the challenge. And we want to make it happen. So we want to get credits into the pipeline late 2024 from this one of the highest quality projects in the world.
Yeah, which is an add-on actually to the 47,000 hectare project that we've done last year, which going to be delivered as well this year. So now we're going to be close to roughly 350,000 hectares of initial projects for our first delivery, if everything works together, right? To 300 on one side, 47,000 on the other. So we're close to 347,000, if I'm not mistaken. That would be a nice delivery by the end of the year if everything settles as supposed to.
Well, and hopefully we do have one other project in that area in the pipeline, and we'll save that for another day.
Yeah,
it's very substantial. I'll put it to our listeners that way. And we're pretty stoked that this is going to happen, and it's a super interesting project as well. So we'll keep that, and that's planned for 2024 delivery too. Now there's some things that we don't control, but what we do control is how quickly we can get our part of this work done, and how we can build positive relationships with both our Indigenous partners and our partners in the BC government who are approving these projects. So we're ready to go.
That's great. And there's other news which will come down the road this year, according to, regarding 2025 and 2026 as well.
Oh, yes.
And that's pretty big too there. So great future for the company. Thanks again, everyone, for watching. Brent, always a pleasure to meet with you virtually so we can give a little bit more information about what we do. If you feel like reaching to us, getting to know us a little bit better, potentially becoming partners, please reach us. Our address, LinkedIn, website, everything is under the description of today's video. So thanks again for watching. Brent, see you next week.
See you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.